Welcome to Classroom Conversations. I'm Rocky Logue. Today we have Brittany McLean. She's a 6th grade teacher. She's going to talk about how she integrated some new technology into her lesson. She's also going to talk about working with kids and giving meaningful feedback and also having the kids assess themselves. So let's jump right in. Okay, for today I have Brittany McLean here. She's going to go over her lesson. She's going to introduce herself a little bit first, and then we're going to dive into her lesson.
All right, so I'm a 6th grade teacher at Oceano Elementary School, and we've been self-contained for 4 years, but for some reason, this is the year that we chose to departmentalize among all the other changes this year. So I teach this year advisory and language and science, and then Sophia Garcia is my partner with math and social studies. And prior to Oceano, I spent 7 years at Mesa Middle School. And so happy to be in 6th grade because I'm still kind of like got a toe in each direction kind of thing. Okay, so trying to think about lesson design and the context that we're currently in versus, hopefully what we'll get back to in some way, shape, or form. Hopefully this experience will help us augment what we've been doing in the long run. But so speaking of that, in the I don't know if it's SAMR, SAMR. I don't know how people pronounce it. But
SAMR's close enough.
Yeah. So I would say that the sequence I'm talking about today is probably mostly in the augmentation realm. So with that tech serving as a substitute with some functional improvements, some things that I'll keep. I'd really like to take advantage. I'm going to do some reflection over the break and take advantage of some of the opportunities to connect students while they're in this context anyway with those authentic situations and sources. I'd love to look into that a little bit more, but not what I'm presenting today.
So hold on, just a quick thing. That SAMR model, if you could go back to the other slide, it's just kind of a guide for implementing educational technology. And right now we have to use a lot of it, and in a class, if we were in the classroom, I'd be talking about this differently, but, and this is kind of a stage of using technology because we do want to use it to enhance the learning. We don't want to use it as a gimmick or just, to make your life harder. And on these different levels, there's, as she talked about, the substitution level. That means you're taking maybe, some document that you would have in person and then just putting it online. And augmentation. So what are you doing to that document to make it better? Are you adding hyperlinks so then the kids can do different activities or adding videos to it? Modification. How are you changing that lesson? How is that tech changing it? What things are you putting in technology wise that you couldn't otherwise do in your classroom? And then finally, how is your technology redefining the whole lesson? So we'll get into some of those other later, but that's what that model that is that we're talking about.
Right. So the sequence that I'm talking about today all started just with a conversation in a live meet. So I threw up the slide that you see here. The topic, all teens should have daily chores. So still, through all of this new interface, trying to keep in mind, that district writing assessment is still looming. It's still out there. So trying to work with that, and 6th graders love to argue, so it's a fun topic anyway. So just threw it out there with some supports, some sentence stems. So this is a slide I've had before. We just used a Google Meet like we would have a discussion in class. So really that's not enhanced in any way. I think the part, though, that as we move forward was more that augmentation was I've really felt this year like I can move forward with the flipped design. And so moving from that discussion that we had, and then we had science the next day, so we were taking a little break. They had some time so basically this was front loading the conversation that we would have the following week in language arts. So I created a Screencastify video using my dot cam, and you can see the snip there of what the page ultimately looked like. We're still using our ISNs, our interactive student notebooks, getting them off the screen a little bit. And what I love about taking that Screencastify and putting it on EdPuzzle is that, number one, I can embed checks for understanding. So these are, the kind of right there questions that help me understand that they understood as they were taking the notes. And so that's an element that I really like, because when we're in class, I can check for understanding. I can look at their faces and gauge confusion or boredom or whatever. And they can ask questions if they're active. But in this case, I can really, there's data. I can see the student while they were taking the notes either got it or didn't get it from the get-go. So that's an element that I love. I love too the accountability on the data side. I can see what percentage of the video they watched. So they might, try to turn it in on Google Classroom, and I see they only watched 80% of it. Well, okay, so that's getting returned to you.
No, this is really cool. EdPuzzle is great. I've used it a lot for, I haven't even thought of using it this way, just, embedding the questions and having watched the video. But this is kind of a cool thing. And in doing these every single time I say, oh, I'm going to do that, I've learned something from doing these videos. And I like the following, I mean, with the little prompts when they're done, or the check for understandings. But we do a lot of document highlighting and stuff. And it would be great, instead of just having the document highlighted, is to do a video, highlight it, put it in EdPuzzle, and then the prompt be, all right, everything I just highlighted, put that on this part of your tree map, or in this case, in your flea map. So that's a really good tool, and using that in different ways.
Yeah, I'm also looking forward to watching what other people you've interviewed have said, because I'm looking to steal, beg, and borrow, like we always do, from the other participants as well. So they took the notes, and then the following Monday, and we in sixth grade here have really gotten pretty deep into the whole Bitmoji Classroom. I've had pretty much a new Bitmoji Classroom for each week of language, the 17 weeks that we've been. And for science as well. And I think, they're cutesy. It's super fun. I can sit with my Chromebook on a Saturday and design a new, Bitmoji Classroom. But the meat of it is that, every single Bitmoji Classroom we have contains our objective for that day and for the lesson. It's interactive. There are links to words that we want students to, interact with. And the slide that you see here, I had some elements there, and then students actually contributed ideas for what animals should go. So it can be an interactive process too. I know some people, though, feel like it's kind of a waste of time. We have, I feel, capitalized on the Bitmoji Classroom to the extent that we can.
Well, some of the things that we're doing, it's a hook. It's just getting the kids interested. And I can see, for in middle school, we have sometimes a problem with getting all the cameras on. I'm sure in sixth grade you do too. But if you're giving something like, hey, you get to pick your animal to be on the Bitmoji Classroom or on the agenda or whatever it is, that might be incentive for that kid to actually turn their camera on, because then they had some buy-in in the classroom. So sometimes that little extra is just, you're getting those kids motivated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I, for this particular lesson, happened to own a penguin costume. So I also dressed up as the penguin, and my model essay was that I would be an emperor penguin. So it all kind of tied together, and it was just a fun day. I'm introducing this essay prompt, but we had a lot of fun with it. So it was really great. I will say we had to train the kids to stop on the slide, because they would go to the Bitmoji Classroom and we would see them on GoGuardian. They'd go directly to the Meet link, which is a link to our attendance form, and then that gives them the Meet link. And so we had to train them to, stop. I expect that you've read the objective and that you've looked around, and so there's a little training involved, as with everything else. So the essay that was introduced, as you can see, if I were an animal, I'd be Anne. So we thought maybe this is a little fun introduction. You can see the left-hand side of the ISN. So the notes that they took were on the right side. And then this is the planning that they did using Britannica School on Clever. And this is just a screenshot of the Google Classroom assignment. So you can see some of the other tools that were offered to students in the assignment and linked there throughout the process. And so from there, they were working on their essay draft. We took a little sidestep into the traits of writing. I really like teaching the traits of writing, because it gives us a common language when we're talking about giving each other feedback, that sort of thing. And so I took the opportunity just to create a short Kahoot And basically it was just the idea was multiple exposures to the vocabulary and concepts, because each of the 3 days in language that week, we started with the Kahoots. And then of course there's the added bonus that you only get to do the Kahoot if you're in your lesson on time. So if you're tardy, you missed the Kahoot, sorry, and they may or may not care about that, but some of them do.
Yeah, I find Kahoot, I've done something called a blind Kahoot. It's really fun to do, and use it to teach lessons, and kids are still totally into it. It is a fun thing. Yeah, I even noticed, some of my kids that don't participate in anything still sign up for the Kahoot. There's very few that don't, but so yeah, it's a great way to get kids fired up about stuff.
Yeah. And I love that it's a tool that they were familiar with prior to the shutdown and distance learning. And so it's something that is a little bit of normal, in this abnormal year for them as well. So from there, and this is kind of the meat, I guess, of what I wanted to talk about. The Change My Mind Challenge was probably my favorite week of language so far. And so basically what you're looking at is these were slides that were created, copy for each student, on the Friday prior to the Monday that we started this. And essentially, we've got a review of what goes in the flea map and some ideas for transitions. And then they had like 27 other slides that contained all of these should questions. So it was, should all teens have daily chores? So we're looping back to that original discussion that we had in our meets, among others, and I'll show some of those. So this is kind of another opportunity for them to front load. And the expectation, of course, wasn't that they completely plan all of 27 prompts, but this is a tool that they were going to use while we were in class the following week. So this was the Bitmoji Classroom. And I've tried to distinguish when we have kind of more teacher-centered lessons where I'm presenting something, and they're still expected to interact, of course, but when it's something like the Bitmoji Classroom you saw before, whereas this Bitmoji Classroom, you'll notice, is more of like, I'm kind of just down in the corner, and that is indicating this is a student-centered, student-forward expectation. I'm stepping back and you're really taking the reins. And that's been successful to varying degrees, but it's something that they really enjoy. When I ask them to reflect, students really would like to, they like the collaboration meets that they get to do. So then this was the next slide, and I keep moving you and I around on my screen. Sorry, as I said, I'm not a Zoom person, so I don't know if that's being effective in the recording or not.
They're not. They're only going to see what's recorded on mine. So okay. However you move us around is fine. I think everything is going good so far. So
okay, fabulous. So this slide, basically, so on the student end, they would have 5 minutes. You can see the prompt at the top. They had 5 minutes to revisit the flea map in the slideshow from the Friday prior. And on my end, I used Peardeck because their Peardeck tab had either a should or a should not choice. And it was, so just, I was given a heads up as the teacher, okay, this many, we're about evenly split, or, ooh, I'm going to have like a 2 versus 8 kind of conversation here. Or in a couple of instances, I had 0 people on the should not side. And so then I was actively planning, okay, what can I say to try to build this argument against whatever they're going to argue? So that was really helpful. And then this was the next student slide. So you can see again, the prompt, still the transition. We're adding this time our talk moves, again, something that they're familiar with. And then we have the should and should not. So in their Peardeck, this is what it looked like. They had this was a drawing slide. And so I had to emphasize, even we just revisited this past week, and I still had to emphasize the text tool, because you get students who want they just write their name largely across the whole thing. So this is where another point similar to EdPuzzle, where I feel like this is something I'm going to continue doing, because if you do something like in the past, I've done, okay, should, you're on this side of the room, should not, you're on this side of the room, or 4 corners. And, those are effective, except that I can see that my friend's on this side. And even though I was thinking this side, I'm going to go over here because that's where my friend is,
Yeah, I want to talk about that prompt. The change your mind prompt is pretty cool too. I can see we do a lot of writing in 7th grade social studies here at Mesa, and obviously most of our writing is argumentative writing. And that's kind of a cool way that you could even bring in social studies. That prompt you could use for, or that activity you could use cross-curricularly, if that's even a term, but I think you know what I mean. So that's a good way to tie in some other things too. It's a nice, it can be focused, but also a broad thing where you can add different types of subjects or thoughts into it as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And okay, so this is where I showed the responses, and I used the overlay or overlap. And so this is kind of what I was talking about. You know, they couldn't see who had chosen what until I clicked the button, you know. And so this was really neat. And there were some instances where you would see like Raul would try dragging his name over to the should side once I revealed it. No. And then they'd try to pull the whole like, oh no, but I put it on the wrong side. Well, I guess you're going to exercise your brain and try to argue the opposite side now. So you can see we had a 2-minute timer. So just trying to structure this, we had the should side presented their arguments for 2 minutes, and then should not got 2 minutes. And then we had sort of an open forum discussion for about another 2. And meanwhile, what I was doing on the whiteboard, which they could see through the Meet, I was tracking whatever arguments, reasons, and evidence and elaboration they were providing in a flea map. So I was trying to sort of show them what, kind of sneak in that concept of reverse mapping a little bit. And again, I would have done that in class too, but it was really neat for me just to see them doing something so similar to what we would do in class in a completely different platform, you know, and it like the thinking was the same. Many of the tools were the same, you know, just a little bit, I think, enhanced by the mystery of which side who was on.
Yeah, I do like that kind of mystery. I've done the same type of activities like you're saying, where, you know, we move from one side of the room to the other. And then you also get not only a kid that wants to be with their friend, then you get the contrarian kids that are like, oh, I would have said should, but just because everybody else went over there, I'm going to go over to shouldn't, which I guess is okay too, to learn how to do both. But you kind of take away that. I mean, it is a little bit difficult. You take away some of their personality, but also you take that away. So they're really having to think about it, you know, especially when you know, hold them accountable and you're like, all right, now that you're here, let's hear what you have to say.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And so the change my mind part came in at the end, and it was so neat because we could physically see, you know, Oliver move from the should to the should not side. And then we got to ask the follow-up, okay, so what was said that changed your mind? And, you know, we had that conversation, and it didn't happen every time, but when it did, it was certainly a fun conversation to have. So again, sort of that crossing the lines, crossing the room was, it was really neat. It was super fun. I really enjoyed it. Here are a couple of the other prompts. The should boys and girls play on the same sports teams was an interesting one. The should recycling be required prompt, I had to personally argue the should not side twice. There were 2 groups where everybody was on the should side. So we had to talk about some of the reasons why that might not be the case. And so that was a really interesting opportunity. So like you said, you know, any prompt can be thrown out there related to any content and really fit into this structure pretty well. So the follow-up to that was Flipgrid, and I know a lot of people are engaging students on Flipgrid already. And I know at the elementary level, we have a lot of, you know, art and lots of kind of fun things. Last spring, when we did our Rube Goldberg challenge, that was Flipgrid. That was super fun. And so in this instance, students chose any of the flea maps from their original slideshow, the Friday prior. And this was an opportunity for them to speak from their maps. And so I really, again, I think this is an enhancement because when I ask students to like whisper speak off their map in class, they're getting the experience, but there's no opportunity really for feedback or for, you know, modeling, student to student modeling. And then if you have one student model speaking off the map in class, well, then, okay, that person's a good writer. And you get this whole, you know, mindset that, well, I'm not going to be as good a writer as that person, whatever. In this case, on the Flipgrid, everybody's expected to speak from the map, or you know, equaling the playing ground a little bit, equalizing the playing ground, and the opportunity for feedback, which is super cool from me and from other students. So we did have a little bit. This was early on this snap, but or snip. we had a little bit of back and forth, and of course it's all moderated. So I'm making sure that it's staying respectful and all of that. So, but I know Flipgrid's been used as a tool.
No, it is great to get. I have every now and then I'll get somebody who's like, well, I don't want to be on camera on Flipgrid. And I'm like, well, you can put an emoji in front of your face, or I believe now they have just an audio as well. I think you can record just audio. So, which is a nice feature.
Yeah. And I think on the 21st of this month, there will be a Google Classroom connection. So you can actually link your Google Classroom, your students. They already sign in with their LucyMR account, but that'll be kind of nice.
Yeah, then you can tie them to each class, because right now you're going through all of them together. You know, it's not necessarily separated by class. One other good thing, one of the best things about Flipgrid is it's completely free. You know, and it's been free. And as far as I know, I think it's going to continue being completely free.
Can't beat that. I know I'm definitely paying for EdPuzzle this year. That is one thing I'll mention. I'm happy to do so because it's making my life so much easier. But yeah, it's kind of a bummer when we're feeding that paycheck back into things, tools that we're using. But
we just got notice that our school is going to pay for the license for us for the school. So.
Well, I know my principal's amazing, so I'm sure if I talk to her about it and we got on board here, that would be that would be something we can examine. Okay, so going back to the essay, because remember throughout all this we've been talking about what we're doing sort of during our live meets, but it's all the async expectation is that you're applying what you're learning in class, whether it's about the traits of writing or developing our argumentation skills, and you're bringing it to this essay. So the slide you see on the top left, I got this idea, stole it from Shauna Whitfield over at Ocean View. And I love the idea that she presented at some point. We've been collaborating so much this year that I have no idea when she did this, but the juxtaposition of the student score and the teacher score. And I think that's always super powerful. So the way we got the student scores is using a Google form. And so you can see a snip here of the top of the form that contained a link to the rubric. So, and of course we talked about the rubric in class. And so basically students scored their writing. And I always stress, you're not scoring yourself, you're scoring what you've written. Like it's really important. I think that distinction sometimes. And so they scored the writing 1 through 4, and then more importantly, justified using language from the rubric, ideally, why they gave their essay that score, why they evaluated it in that way. And then, so overall, they did some reflecting on this first essay. So this was probably like a 3-week process. And then what that led to is sort of a DWA practice round. And so this was a day where they were expected to open the slide, and the first slide had a video from me, a screencast using that slideshow and explaining, kind of similar to what you were talking about earlier with putting audio on all of your slides. But just kind of going through the slideshow in the video format. And so a little bit of differentiation here. I lean on student choice pretty heavily for differentiation. And so to extend, excuse me, students were able to find, and we've talked about credible sources and how do we know a source is credible. So if they found a credible source they wanted to use in their essay, they were welcome to. The other 3 sources had been asynchronous readings each day the week prior. So they had already encountered those texts as well. And then the bridge map slide was just to support those internal citations of their sources in their essay. So trying to sneak in, as many supports as possible in a single slideshow.
Yeah. No, this all looks really good. I'm just kind of impressed. I'm processing some stuff going, oh, what can I take? I like the self-assessment. In one of the other sessions in these, we were talking about peer editing and peer assessments. And now I like this self-assessment and getting kids, because that's one of the things I struggle with is, you make your rubric and you understand it and you explain it to the kids, but then what you get when you finish scoring everything from kids or parents is, well, what's my grade? Or what did I get on that? Or why did I get this? I'm like, did you read the rubric? No. So it's a nice way to make sure that sometimes obviously, you explain it and you expect everybody to know, but I think this is a good way to get, one, the kids to buy in because they're scoring themselves. And then two, they have to read the rubric in order to give themselves the score. They can't just, I got a 2. Well, why did you get a 2? You're supposed to fill out I always say I'm like a 3-year-old in class. I'm going to ask you why. Anything you say, I'm going to say, why? And that little slide you guys have, or I think you said Shauna did it. Then you borrow it for, like, it has that explanation. You can't just put, well, I got all 4s. It was great. Well, no, you have to, why were you at 4s or why were you at 3s? So
Right.
I really like that process of getting people to look at it. I almost think it might be nice to even have a parent box on there too. So the parents are then forced to also read that rubric. So then, you don't get the question, well, how come they got all 3s? Well, did you read what the rubric said? Do you, type of deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the language we use, of course, is always so important. It's like, I didn't give you a 4. Your essay scored a 4
Yes.
according to the rubric. And, just because you earn a 4 on this piece of writing doesn't necessarily mean. Sorry.
Santa's showing up. That's all right.
Can I mute?
I can always edit this part out, or I could just leave it.
We will be getting lunch from Old One's Cantina.
Nice.
So if you are
Fabulous.
on campus,
Sorry, pajama day, Friday before break.
Please look at their menu and email me with what you want.
That's awesome.
I'm only saying this once, so I hope you heard. Just kidding. If you are on campus and you want lunch from Old One's Cantina, please email me with your order. Let's see. I need to have them in the next 10, 15 minutes. Thank you. Y Feliz Navidad.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Awesome.
Feliz Navidad.
Is there a way to mute our phones?
I don't know. Okay. It's fine. I can edit it out or I can leave it. But yeah, that's that's the other thing too, that the explanation, putting grades in the grade book for, if you're in the upper levels or if you're, middle school or high school. I used to split up the rubric and I put in 4, depending on what it was, I would put in, put in 4 different grades for the rubric. But then that becomes cumbersome and it's still like, well, why did I get this score? So I think it's really great to have kids discuss the rubric. I'd love to have that discussion at home as well. So when that final score gets put in, so for instance, if we're using kind of like the DWA rubric or like what I use for that, the total score comes out to an 11. So I just put it in once, but it's like, well, why did I get a 9? Well, 9's great. You got 3s on all parts of the rubric. You did what you were supposed to do. You showed us that you did, but it's only a 9 out of 11.
Yeah.
Type of deal.
I think we have a lot of opportunity in our district as a whole to revisit that whole idea of rubrics and the CASP rubrics and the, DWA, which have become the same in recent years. And let's translate the rubrics to Spanish and let's involve our families in the conversation, because the rubrics are meant to be more formative than summative, right?
No, for sure.
They become summative, but in class they should really be formative. So.
Yeah, and we've been talking about too is kind of every assessment is a formative assessment, even if it's a final exam, because then you're moving on to the next level, and then hopefully that next level gets that information and then pushes the kids on further and so on and so forth. So
totally. Yeah. Okay. So I did want to take a moment just to I love Mote. It's awesome. So it's an extension on Chrome. And once it's, hooked up to your Chrome, it just pops up whenever you have on a doc or even on Google Classroom. When you want to make a comment, you click on the little icon. And so one thing I've had to learn is that, so Mote will generate a transcript of what you say, and I forget how long you have to record. So you hit the little M, and then I can talk to Denise about this paragraph without having to take the time to type out, a whole paragraph to her. Originally, when I first started using Mote, I would go into the transcript and I would be really meticulous about editing it, making sure that it reflected what I said. And then I was taking more time to do that than I would, just typing out a comment. So if it's a quick comment, I'll type it. But I love Mote for those longer comments because the students are just clicking play and listening to me anyway. They're not reading the transcript most of the time. So It's been really, really helpful.
I have not used Mote, but that's one of I have heard that that's a great tool, and there's some other ones out there as well. But yeah, that having that audio feedback is just great. Because you can sometimes just articulate more. Sometimes when you put it in writing, it doesn't have, the feel of what you were trying to get. It's just kind of static.
Right.
So.
Well, and I know for instance, our second grade teachers love it because they have some non-readers in first grade too. So it's nice that students can hear, whatever feedback you're giving them. And I think Seesaw has some of that capability as well, but it's nice that with Mote, you can have it on Google. So they went through the same reflection process with this television essay. And actually, we just revisited, this was back in October, and we just revisited, they just turned in this essay on Wednesday of this week. That's how long we spent fine tuning and revising and talking about. And so hopefully we got the most bang for our buck out of that one assignment. I did want to mention in terms of just other things that have been super helpful. This was actually a different writing assignment, but I just used a slide because in class, I love capitalizing on that peer-to-peer feedback. And so basically what I did here is I highlighted all of the essays in the folder from Classroom, and I changed the share settings so anyone in Lucy MR can comment. And then I went through and I linked each essay to this slide, which was a little tedious, but worth it in the end because you're giving students access to each other's writing. And so you can see there are some stems for ideas for the glows and the grows. And the expectation was you visit 2 to 3 other essays and you comment. And so this was just another kind of augmentation of something I would do in the class, but it also in the class, they would only maybe read 2 or 3 other essays. If they wanted to, they could read every other 6th grader's essay. And I mean, to be completely frank, there's a little bit of gratification in the fact that if I click on someone's link and their essay's still blank, that's like an added layer of accountability.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess this person hasn't done their job,
Well, and the extra time that you spent making it like this would have been time you would have spent in class trying to get so-and-so to so-and-so's, essay. Or, hey, can you share it with Johnny? Can you share it with Timmy? Okay, what's your ID number? Okay, and then I think you're gaining the time back by doing this, making it shareable, and making this, even if it takes you, let's say, an hour or however long it took you. That time would, again, when you're just having kids, even in class, I have a hard time when, can you share that with the rest of your group? And it takes 10 minutes to share a document. So I think you're probably gaining the time, even though you're spending the time outside of class by doing this for them.
And it really honestly probably took less than 10 minutes to do all the links because you just get into a rhythm and you just make it happen. I did want to mention too, just in the spirit of, I've talked a little bit about extension opportunities. We have every Friday. So after this today, I'm booked all up with appointments today. So students who in the span of those 3 weeks and what became even a longer length of time had every opportunity on a Friday. We have 6 total half-hour appointments open to students. So if students wanted to get some one-on-one help with their essay, they would make an appointment with me. And then we would have an individual meet. And then there were a couple of occasions where I just held sort of, okay, at 10:15, here's a general essay help meet. Anybody who wants to come talk about the essay, log in. And so those were really helpful as well. And then I did just want to mention our website has been super effective, I feel, this year at, when the families understand that this is their hub, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I think that it can become a really effective tool. I have never before had, you can see in the bottom right corner there, that was all of trimester 1, and every single title of each stage in the flow map is a link to the Bitmoji Classroom. And for every single Bitmoji Classroom, if you click on my Bitmoji, it links to the lesson slides I used for that lesson. So, I mean, we just got 4 new students in the span of a month, and I was able to say, hey, here's what we've done for language. Click through and kind of check it out and see if there's anything that's familiar to you. And so I think this has been something that I will continue doing. We've lived and died by our slides for a long time.
Slides are the best of the Google suite, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, they're fabulous. They're so dynamic, and the reason that I grouped them into a flow map is obviously like the Bitmoji Classroom slideshow started to get huge and was therefore taking a long time to load on students' Chromebooks and that sort of thing. So I consolidated, and then the ELA notebook you see there is a link to. There's a folder containing PDFs of all of my pages. There's a slideshow where I've snipped. Like literally the digital version of my ISN is just there. So again, we get 4 new students. I give them their ISN. I say, you need to copy pages 15, 17, 21. Those are super helpful and critical. And we're going to be talking. And, you know, I feel so much like the content is more accessible this year than it ever has been before. And I make all my stuff so that anyone can view. So not only the students, but the parents can go on and see, like, what are you doing in language this week? Oh, you're reading a short story. Tell me about it, you know? So if there's that level of accountability at home, I think this tool really is a solid one. And then along with that, we post every single day on the organization tab on our site what students' asynchronous work is, oftentimes linking to the Google Classroom assignments. So that's been super helpful too. Students can find things in more than one place, which is awesome. Okay, I know this is going on a long time, so
no, that's
I'll just point out in this so this was a science project, basically, I guess you'd call it. I've been trying to follow STEM Scopes, our new curriculum, but I'm obviously having to do a lot of my own stuff to it. And so the links that you see, the student names, those are all email links. So again, like you were saying before, instead of them having to ask each other for their, you know, ID numbers and then adding the tag, I just went through and linked, okay, send to : and then just every kid's. And once we have it, now I can just copy and paste it, you know, and other projects, they can have access to each other. The circulatory, respiratory, etc., were links to Google Meets. So this was on a day when I was personally in 7 different Google Meets at one time, the main Google Meet for the lesson, and then when they broke out into these different meets. So the mute tab extension was super helpful on that day. And I was explaining earlier, I realized that Zoom has had breakouts, that Google Meet has breakouts, but I want to be in all of them. Even if I can't hear what they're saying, I want them to see my face. There's just something about that proximity that I think is really important for on-taskedness. And
no,
so
for
that's
sure.
something.
It is. I always say when I set up my because I use Zoom more often, when I set up my breakout rooms, I always feel like I always tell the kids, I feel like I'm on a roller coaster at Disneyland or somewhere, and I'm starting to go up the hill. And when I press that breakout room button, it's going to be like coming down the hill. And, you know, I get always a little bit of, you know, those butterflies and hoping everybody makes it into the rooms they're supposed to. And by the time I get there, I hope you guys are presenting what you're supposed to, type of deal. So I do, looking at Google Meets and having several of those open at one time does have you the ability to just kind of just peek really quick instead of having to leave one room and then hop into the other one, and vice versa. So, and I guess it probably also helps if you're presenting something like in Zoom, if I'm presenting something to the whole class and then I have to go to the breakout rooms, well, then it takes the timer down. The kids can't see it anymore. Obviously they can't even see it in the breakout room. So,
yeah, no, that's a good point too. And I like to, even if they're muted, I'll tell my kids, you know, hey, I'm going to mute your tab at some point and I'll have it unmuted at other points. You won't know when, but if you do have a question for me, just leave it in the chat. And then that way, when I go into the different tabs, I can see if they're talking to me or to each other, you know, and preferably they're unmuting to talk to each other. And then anything from me goes in the chat, but you know, best laid plans and all that.
Yeah. Everything, all so far, everything's been really great. And it's been a lot of cool stuff. Again, a little bit more work on the front end, but for the majority of it, obviously the school year specific with the kids' names and everything like that, that's something you do at the beginning of the school year. But all of the other lessons, that whole writing lesson, just use it next year and tweak it. I mean, even if you are changing the prompt, or you could use it for a whole other prompt and use kind of all the stuff and then just take out if it's not argumentative, if it's narrative writing, you're gonna just change some things, but you just copy the slideshow and then you just tweak that. So it's a nice base of everything.
Yeah. The reviewing past year's slides is always just like amazingly helpful to me. I personally have to be really careful when I'm creating screencasts not to say something that's specific to a date this year, or, something we were just talking about this, because, if I use that again next year, obviously that might not be applicable, but I'll get better as I do it more, as with anything. Okay, and then I just want to do a little plug for Peardeck, because, and this is actually a link to a whole different slideshow of some Peardeck lessons. And there are other links in here. For instance, I linked like the actual form to the visual up here. So, and I tried to make everything, so anyone can view. So if this slideshow is made available, please, the only thing I ever ask is, when you make it better, let me know.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I know people take my ideas just like I take other people's ideas and improve upon them, and then I never hear from them. And I'm like, I want to benefit from you taking that and making it better.
That, and if you do copy stuff, like if you are copying a slideshow, because this happens to me all the time, make sure that all of the other stuff that are embedded in it, you make copies of those too. Because sometimes I'll just put out lessons people can use, and then they'll use them. And then I get a ton of requests from somebody's students to get access to some form or something else. So make sure when you make a copy, I know this is more an example lesson, but if you do get a lesson from somebody, make a copy of it, but make sure you go through everything and make all those copies too. But no, Peardeck is great. That's another one. It is a paid one, but I think the district's paying for it this year, and it has a lot of really cool features, especially for distance learning. I used it before in the classroom. It's got some great features for the same things we talked about with moving back and forth, like making choices. The kids can't necessarily see everybody else's, so it gets them to be more individual with their choices and make it based off of what they're feeling as opposed to what their friends are feeling.
Mm-hmm. And I love that it's anonymous in real time, but then it produces data that I can see that's personalized to each student's response. That's always nice too.
All right.
So
I think that's good. My lights, I saw you doing that same thing too. I got to do it. My automatic lights shut off as well. So no, that was a great conversation. Thanks for joining us. And yeah, that's a great lesson, and I'll put the links into those examples so people can access.
Thanks for inviting me to this conversation. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to seeing what other people have.
Nice.
So. Thanks, Rocky.
You're welcome.
Tell Kelly I said hi.
I will.
Bye.